The trade deficit narrows in January after exports surged more than 22%, led by the electronics sector. ASEAN and EU officials agreed to develop a framework for a free trade agreement at the ongoing summit in Manila, while BSP Governor Amando Titanco warns on protectionism. Mazda distributor Bermaz Auto Philippines gets the green light from the SEC to go public in a 1.2 billion peso IPO. And the Treasury Department is planning to issue new retail bonds to raise funds. This is amid rising inflation, widening budget deficit, and a looming rate hike in the United States. Good afternoon, I'm Sean Yao. You are now in the loop. The trade deficit unexpectedly narrowed in January, with exports growing twice as fast as expected. JP joins us now to help us flesh out the details. Is this buoying the peso, Jake?
Well, I mean, not by a lot, to be honest, but it's definitely not hurting the peso's chances this Friday, Sean. The local currency currently at 50.35 against the greenback. And despite a bit of turbulence in the early going of the forex markets, it's still flexing a little bit of muscle. And that's what happens when exports grow twice as fast, more than twice as expected, and imports slightly underwhelming, helping the trade deficit actually improve. Now, some interesting trends when looking at exports, with exports to our traditionally strongest market, Japan, actually dipping by over 6.5%. Now, despite all the strong rhetoric favoring protectionism, exports to the U.S. actually rose by more than 21%, with exports to China and the Netherlands also picking up, which is a sign perhaps that recovery in the major economic regions of the world might be showing some signs of life. Now, on the import side, you'll see that capital goods and industrial machinery still dominate inbound goods, but the strongest pickup was in mineral fuels, such as oil, rising nearly 43% year-on-year. Definitely a reminder that higher oil prices putting pressure on both imports and inflation. Now, overall, though, the outlook on our trade deficit is a bit mixed. If I just pull up this chart for you guys, yes, you're going to see that it's still relatively high. It's at a relatively high level, about $2.3 billion. But given estimates peg the deficit at closer to $3 billion for January, well, that's a pretty decent beat, actually. And though still large, maybe something we can work on moving forward to also, and could benefit the forex and markets overall as well, Sean.
That's right. I think I'm hearing a sigh of relief for the peso, with those better trade figures favoring the exporters. However, the PSE not taking any strength from these figures, huh?
You'd think that they would, right? But not the case. Industrial stocks in particular, which saw pretty strong, where most of our exporters reside, saw an impressive rally at the open peter out. They're already down to just under 0.1%. And the PSC as a whole is in fact 0.5% down so far, losing along with the broader ASEAN region this Friday. And on the main index, no one's taking hits harder than the Lushotan group. You're going to see here that LTG is already 4% down, with more than 2 million shares changing hands. And with the company still dealing with the prospect of a public smoking ban hammering the stock, well, holding firms are thus down, and only beaten out today by financials as well as services stocks on the race to the bottom. Markets seem to be bracing themselves for the Fed's midweek meeting in a few days, with the PSE following the beat of the broader ASEAN sell-off. Sean, back up to you.
Thank you very much, JP. Now, on Asia, all eyes are now on Korea. South Korea, that is, where President Park Geun-hye has been removed from office. This is the culmination of a month-long scandal over corruption, which has also implicated powerful business leaders, including the Samsung heir apparent. Let's get right out to Rishad Salamat in Hong Kong for the market's reaction. Rish, what are the numbers telling you?
Well, you know, they're telling us in various different messages, but, you know, there are two themes really appearing and emerging today. And, well, the bulk of the action when it comes to the market is the bond market, and also, as you mentioned, on the political front as well there in South Korea. Let's start off with this rout in global government that continuing ahead of the U.S. jobs report here. Now, Treasury is heading for their longest slump in more than 40 years. That's something playing out on the regional fixed income markets as well. American payrolls report, of course, is the last major piece of the jigsaw, a bit of economic data before the Fed, of course, meets next week. Now, investors almost to a man convinced that there's going to be a rate increase. Meanwhile, and getting to the South Korean situation, currencies and the stock market fluctuating after indeed President Park Geun-hye was removed from office. This Seoul Constitutional Court upholding the president's impeachment, ultimately triggering an election in the future. The Kospi was trading mixed. It was down. It was fluctuating just beforehand. It's at the moment moving to the upside, by about 0.2%. And that's really down to the uncertainty being removed here. It was a unanimous decision by the justices. They agreed Park did abuse her power and break the law to help her confidant and friend Choi Soon-sil funnel money through her foundations. Let's have a look at the broader markets. And it's looking to be quite a positive equity day just generally. We're turning more and more positive as we go along. Taking a look at the yen hitting 115. Where are we at the moment? 115 yen, 36 sen. Putting that reflation trade back in order, particularly when it comes to Japan. And we're seeing that shift from bonds into equities because of that sell-off taking place. Nikkei 225 up at the moment by 1.5% as we head towards the close there. China markets, though, very slow going today. Much expected for what the central bank governor would have to say about monetary policy. Now, he didn't say that much on that front, but he did talk about the yuan's value, saying that it should be relatively stable this year. And even as we have this environment of U.S. interest rates going up and how that all contributes to foreign exchange volatility. Look at the Hang Seng, just up now by about 0.1%. A little bit of movement for the Shanghai Composite, but it is actually broadly unchanged now on 32.16. So this is what's going on at the moment. It's been all about Korea. It's been all about the bond markets, or should I say sovereign bond markets here as well. And with that all in mind, it's just time for me to say have a great weekend there in Manila.
That's right. It's a bond kind of day. Thank you very much. And have a happy weekend as well. Rish Salamat from Hong Kong. Back here, East meets West on this Friday. We have ASEAN and European Union officials agreeing to develop a framework for a free trade agreement. High-level officials from both economic blocs are gathered at the Conrad in Pasay today for their annual business summit and ministers' retreat. Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez says that the framework will include a single global judicial body for resolving investment-related disputes. Meanwhile, EU Ambassador to the Philippines Frank Yesen says economic ties between the two regional blocs are strong, but there is a need to ramp up integration efforts and push for more open borders.
As we look around the world, it is clear for me that Europe will be one of the strong continued supporters of free trade, economic opening up, and we do that even if other partners are becoming more reluctant to that. And I'm very pleased to see that within ASEAN we have strong support, and I think it's more important than ever that we work hand in hand to promote the free trade agenda where we have such strong mutual interest.
The highest level official from the EU here for the summit is European Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström, who says any bilateral discussions with individual countries should align with the regional framework. BSP Governor Amando Tetanco says the country's fiscal position should see us through external shocks. Tetanco also flagged the rise of protectionism.
To me, these are imperatives for cooperation to make growth in ASEAN and EU both sustainable and inclusive. The development of MSMEs, the development of a digital economy, and advancing human resource development. This is particularly relevant today when the global environment remains confronted with certain challenges. One major risk that we face is the growing tendency towards protectionism and populism. Brexit and the potential shift in U.S. economic policies are manifestations of this trend. If these inward-oriented sentiments continue to gain traction, this will undermine cooperation and potentially shrink global trade. This could in turn derail the global economy's already protracted path to recovery. In this time of uncertainty, better and stronger global cooperation is the best way forward.
Vermaz Auto Philippines has obtained the green light from the SEC to go public. The Mazda distributor plans to sell 155 million shares at a maximum price of 8 pesos each. That will raise a total of up to 1.2 billion pesos, which a company will use to construct a warehouse, as well as repair and trading facilities. The offer will start on March 27th, with a target listing date on April 7th. If this pushes through, this will become the second IPO of the year, following Wilcon Depot's almost 8 billion peso offer. Wilcon shares will be listed on March 31, with underwriter First Metro saying that it will be priced between 5 to 5 pesos 68 centavos apiece. Final price will be announced on March 17. And the PSE is targeting 7 to 8 IPO this year, actually. Included in this pipeline are the names like the Big Chill, Audio Wave, Cebu Landmasters, and the biggest so far this year, Eagle Cement. Timing, though, might be tricky for these names because apart from a more hawkish Fed, the SEC will also be raising the minimum public float this year. IPOs will be required to sell at least 15% of total equity to the public, up from the current 10%. Those already listed will be given the rest of the year to comply. The regulator may also hike it up by one more time by year-end, taking the minimum float to 20%. Chairwoman of the SEC, Teresita Herbosa, says that the target is to release the new rules by June. The goal is to eventually take it to 25%, in line with other major bourses in the region. Commissioner Efiro Amatong told Bloomberg TV that the agency believes the higher ceiling won't be too hard on the companies. And it's not just the equities market getting all the action. The bond exchange expects to hit its 150 billion peso issuance target this year. And so far, the Philippine Dealing and Exchange has a fifth of that in the bank. And likely to add to that are the debt programs, which the SEC approved on Thursday. Mega World's now cleared to raise up to 30 billion pesos, but the plan is to issue an initial tranche of 12 billion pesos this month just to bankroll 4 projects. STI's 5 billion peso bond shelf was also approved. It will initially sell 3 billion pesos to fund campus expansion. Meanwhile, Ayala Land's now seeking SEC approval to issue 7 billion pesos worth of bonds due in 2027. That is on top of the 10 billion the company already issued in February. The government's also tapping the bond market. The Treasury Department says it's considering a retail bond sale to boost government efforts. Treasurer Rosalia De Leon says the bonds will target individual investors, but the timing has to be right. The government last sold retail bonds in September, raising about 100 billion pesos. That is about a third less than the previous offering under President Aquino. Analysts say markets are calling for higher rates as inflation picks up.
We've seen the yield curves, at least yields on the domestic front, a bit volatile because there's some lack of liquidity, particularly in the longer term, the longer maturity bonds.
We pause for a short break, but when we return, President Duterte warns that he might be forced to impose martial law in Mindanao if the local government does not step up. Foreign Affairs or former Foreign Affairs Secretary Perfecto Yasay says that there is life after rejection. Our conversation with him after this short break. You're back in the loop. He has said that he won't declare it, but clearly, martial law remains on President Duterte's mind. At a gathering of local officials in Davao City, he warned that he could impose martial law in Mindanao if the LGU does not help him improve the security situation in the region. He urged him to use the police to prevent terrorism from spinning out of control. Duterte also ordered the military to use all its available assets in waging a war against the New People's Army.
Either tulungan ninyo ako or I will declare martial law tomorrow. Ngayon kung mapipilitan ako mag-martial law, then you cuddle drugs and terrorists. I'll be forced to arrest you. Sayang ang pagkakaibigan natin dito sa because sabi ko, I will not sit here as an inutile president.
Chinese survey ships have been spotted in Benham Rise, an area of the Pacific which the United Nations has ruled to be part of the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana described Beijing's move as very concerning and ordered the Navy to drive away the foreign ships if they are seen again. Lorenzana said the country must continue lodging diplomatic actions to question Beijing's activity in Benham Rise as well as the South China Sea.
The problem with the Chinese is that they're cherry-picking the laws that they're going to follow. Ito, sundin namin ito, WTO will follow this, but we do not follow this ruling. So they can do it because to them, I think Mike is right.
And despite a very public downfall, former Foreign Affairs Secretary Perfecto Yasay says no hard feelings. But in his first sit-down interview since he was rejected by the Commission on Appointments, Yasay maintains that he did not legally acquire U.S. citizenship. He spoke to News 5 head Luchi Cruz Valdez. Let's listen.
There's life after rejection of your appointment as Secretary of Foreign Affairs. I have more time for family, and I just had a haircut, so one of the pleasures that you get.
Did you see it coming, though?
No, I was very confident that the position I took was correct. But nevertheless, I'm very happy that our democracy works. The process of our checks and balances and the mechanisms that support it are strong, and the Commission on Appointment did its job in making sure that the checks and balances are safeguarded. They did their job, I did mine as well, and so I have no regrets about it.
In the second to the last hearing, the U.S. citizenship issue came out, and it was then that it became a full-blown issue. In the interim, did you for a moment wonder whether you had indeed hidden something, at least as far as the perception of the CA members is concerned?
No, Luchi. Let me tell you, let's look at the two instances where people claim I lied. One, that I was a citizen. I became a U.S. citizen.
Did you not?
I said I applied and was granted U.S. citizenship in November 26, 1986. But I did not legally acquire U.S. citizenship because at that time of my application, I was disqualified to do so because of a preconceived intent of abandoning my U.S. residency at the time, and 3 months thereafter, I actually abandoned my residency by returning back to the Philippines for good. Under immigration law, that makes the grant of U.S. citizenship void ab initio. So, you see, this was a conflicting position that I, as a former U.S. lawyer and a specialist in immigration law of the United States, took versus the Philippine legislators who had their different views, and I don't fault them for that. So, did I lie about saying that I did not legally obtain U.S. citizenship? The facts are clear. I did not lie. My view might have been inconsistent or contradictory to what the members of the commission thought, but I did not lie. The second is, they say that I denied having a U.S. passport. I did not deny having a U.S. passport. I have always accepted the fact that on November 26 of 1986, I was granted U.S. citizenship. In fact, I was issued a naturalization certificate as an evidence of that grant. I also, as a result of that issuance of a naturalization certificate, was issued a U.S. passport. But then again, when I said that I did not obtain a U.S. passport, I was referring to what was alluded in media that on sometime in 2006, I was issued a United States passport bearing a particular number. I deny that, and I continue to deny that, but I do not deny the fact that in 1986, I was not only granted U.S. citizenship, I was granted the evidence of that U.S. citizenship, which is the naturalization certificate and a U.S. passport.
Okay, sir. Meron lang kalabuan dun sa mga terminology na kailangan nating klaruhin, sir. When you say that you've been granted U.S. citizenship, doesn't that make you a citizen? Are you trying to say that under U.S. immigration laws, you could be given a U.S. passport and not be a citizen? This is what's not clear.
No. I'm not saying that at all. You can be granted U.S. citizenship, but that grant may not necessarily be legal or valid at the time it was granted because there might have been elements that were not complied with. Now, it's just like obtaining...
So it's not automatic. So when you receive a notification that your application for U.S. citizenship has been granted, it doesn't automatically make you a citizen. It's not what you're saying,
no.
in effect.
You are granted, meaning...
Yes, you've been given citizenship.
It's just like, let me just use an analogy to make our people understand what it is all about. You have been married, you're granted your marriage, but that marriage had some essential requisite that you alleged later on, after your marriage had already been performed. And then that marriage was turned out to be null and void ab initio because there were elements at that time that it was granted, which is, for instance, you had a vitiated consent. And that's exactly the kind of a situation that applies in my case, which according to U.S. immigration law, if at that time you applied, or if at that time you applied you had a preconceived intent, or if within 2 years after you were granted U.S. citizenship, you abandon your residency, you are disqualified to obtain that U.S. residency.
The man replacing Yasay, now acting Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo, says that the department will carry on with his work, or its work rather. Manalo said that he had a meeting with his predecessor right after his appointment. The two talked about the transition of jobs and the responsibilities, including the work needed for the ASEAN summit.
His biggest tip was to say that to do our job with integrity and to maintain our professionalism in the department, and to always have the interests of the country at heart.
After the short break, NBN-ZTE has had a flashback Friday. Sounds familiar? Well, the Chinese company is gunning for the project yet again, this time with the blessings of a different president. still watching In the Loop. The NBN ZTE scandal nearly brought down the Arroyo government. Corruption allegations scuppered plans to build a national or a nationwide broadband network, which the Duterte government says should now be revived given the country's dismal internet speeds. Bim Santos has the details.
10 years ago, an ambitious telecoms project ended up in a massive corruption scandal that rocked the Arroyo administration. 2 governments later, the Chinese firm involved in the botched deal is raring to return, and officials are keen to avoid the ghosts of the past.
I will be transparent. The blueprint of the broadband, including details, will be put online. And I said I want the citizenry to make inputs to that.
The 2007 NBN ZTE deal was scrapped following allegations that government officials sought and offered bribes to have the $330 million contract approved. Plans to build a nationwide broadband network were revived by the Duterte administration on Monday, and China's ZTE is one of several companies that have expressed interest.
So we believe we will be able to give the government sufficient support to realize and materialize the MVP plan. We have a long way to go in terms of implementation plan and in terms of, let's say, financing plan.
ZTE said it could tweak its previous proposal given technological changes. The project itself will cost more than estimated 10 years ago, with the government saying it may hit some 77 billion pesos.
We all know that actually seems around 10 years ago, the government already initiated a similar plan, we called NBN before, which actually ZTE was participated. What I can see is the idea or the application is pretty much the same. The only difference is technology has been involved. So the application has been involved as well.
Chinese firm Huawei is also willing to participate and is looking to leverage on its edge as a network equipment provider to Philippine telcos.
By participating this, we will be supporting all the different industries, right, in order to help to make the best proposals to the governments.
The Information and Communications Technology Department has put up a draft project blueprint. The 49-page document, available on its website, details the rationale behind the project, which aims to provide low-cost internet connections of at least 10 Mbps by 2020. Comments are currently being solicited, and a more detailed plan will be presented to President Rodrigo Duterte after stakeholder consultations. Bim Santos, Bloomberg TV, Philippines.
All right, this is about the time where we take a look at some of today's movers in the PSE. Jake, I have an idea. We were talking about telcos, and you know, this is one of the sagas we've been watching out for almost a year now. So how are the telcos doing on the back of the revival of this whole nationwide broadband network plan?
It's uncanny how you can sort of read my mind, because that's exactly where I wanted to take this discussion, Sean. Looking at telcos, and let's start off with the broad index, and you're going to notice, apart from the Luciatan Group, you're going to see also that the telcos are among the worst performers. You're going to see Globe Telecom here down by about 2.5%, and PLDT, which was not far behind Globe Telecom in losses, starting to pare back those that slide to about 1.9% of losses. But it's still a pretty dramatic drop for them. In fact, if you don't believe that, take a look at the stock of themselves. And this is the intraday movement for both Globe and PLDT. And PLDT, of course, trying to mount that comeback, but finding it very, very hard to get out of the hole right now. Of course, the prospects of having a third or even a fourth telco operator here. Of course, the Secretary Salalima mentioned that he prefers local companies to partner up with, to come in with foreign partners to help them also. And the revival of this broadband network could actually knock down a couple of competitive barriers between these companies also, and really change the dynamics in this entire industry. So definitely a lot of changes for that the telco industry will have to prepare itself for in the coming years. And not just to mention the technological change that's really gripping the industry also. That seems to happen almost every other month in telcos also. So lots of headwinds here and lots of things to digest. Take your time and really try to understand all the items and all the details, guys.
All right, well, Jay, I'm going to the other saga, our other favorite saga, of course. Down the mine shaft I go, just to give you a break. It's been quite a long week for everybody.
It's opposite day
I
today.
know, right? It's Groundhog Day. So yesterday, Abra shares did close up almost 10%, 9.8%. To be precise, today it's kind of flat, which is really surprising, considering that the news that came out from Abra, and I am going to call them maybe the first casualty or patient zero of this mining audit of Secretary Gina Lopez. Now, they did announce the end of their venture with Canadian miner Bezra Gold. And of course, they're citing uncertainties with regard to the future of the mining sector. Now, they were supposed to explore tenements in Abra, of course, with Jabil Corporation, Cadabra Mining, and Phil Earth Mining. All these partners, though, they all opted, so they all agreed to terminate this pact. Now, all is not lost just yet because the plan is to pursue multinational strategic partners or partners that can take over their mining discoveries as originally declared by Besra. So they're trying to replace Besra. We'll see if they can or if they find someone brave enough to do that in the current environment.
It's always sad to see a breakup happen, Sean, even among miners, of course. But given all the headwinds again, and also all the uncertainty that we're seeing with that's been gripping the mining space, and also global nickel prices. I wouldn't blame Basra for actually deciding to call it quits for the time being, and let's hope that things clear up for them, at least for the betterment of either stock. But odds don't look too good for Abra. I take it.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen. It depends on how fast they can find their partner, but the whole point here is, this is it. We're actually seeing legit fallout from the mining closures. Meanwhile, Jape, it is 2 o'clock. Time to revisit our top stories. The country's trade deficit narrowed in January to $2.31 billion after a resurgence in exports. Outbound shipments in January surged by 22.5% as electronics rebounded, offsetting a 30% decline in mineral exports. Imports sustained a 9.1% growth, with capital goods and raw materials taking the lion's share of the pie. ASEAN and EU officials make a stand for free trade as high-level delegations from the two blocs meet for a business summit in Pasay City. EU Ambassador Franz Jessen says the two-nation blocs should now more than champion open trade and push for ramping up integration efforts. In his speech, Bangko Sentral Governor Tetangco flagged rising popularity of protectionism as a risk to the global economy. Meanwhile, Trade Secretary Mon Lopez called on economic officials to develop a framework for free trade agreements among the members of the two regional blocs. And another company getting the SEC's green light to go public. I'm talking about Mazda distributor Burmaz Auto Philippines, planning to sell 155 million shares at a maximum price of 8 pesos per share to raise up to 1.2 billion pesos. The offer will start on March 27 and list on April 7. That is just a week after another IPO of hardware retailer Wilcon. All right, let's now check back in with JP for afternoon movements over at the PSE. So, JP, what are you seeing?
It's the color is changing to red, and it's a proper sell-off right now, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, PSE, a main index firmly below 7,250 at this day, and it continues to retreat. A while ago, we actually saw all sectors down, but property stocks surprisingly trying to mount a little bit of resistance today. They did dip under the dip to a loss just a few moments ago, but they're now trying to fight back again, up by but very, very measly gains so far for property. And really, when you look at it too, it seems that the property stocks really facing a lot of headwinds today. And you're seeing that of all the property stocks, only 2 are trying to pick up the slack at the moment. It happens to be 2 of the largest ones though, SM Prime and MegaWorld. We know MegaWorld also just had that bond registration for 8 billion pesos approved by the SEC. But both stocks are the only ones so far up in this sector that's just showing a little bit of strength amidst this entire sell-off that's gripping the PSE and the ASEAN region. Remember too that there are growing concerns with among BPOs that the policies in the United States under a Trump administration could impact this very, very important industry here in the Philippines. And remember that both MegaWorld and SM Prime have a lot of exposure to these, either through BPO employee spending, or even just the operation or leasing out of commercial space to these BPO firms. So this is one of those sectors that will be one to watch. And don't let the semi-flatness that you're seeing at the moment fool you. It's been very, very active for this day, Sean.
And JP, while we wait for the CA to resume Secretary Gina Lopez's confirmation hearing, we do have news that Chinese nickel imports are starting to fall. Okay, how is the mining sector taking this new development?
Well, I mean, it's the last thing they wanted to hear, and it's just the latest in a pile of problems that we're seeing also. Now, in fairness, though, what a lot of analysts we talked to, one of the analysts we talked to said was that the reason you saw this drop also because of that bad weather. The same reason that CEMEX said that their fourth quarter earnings fell because they couldn't ship to the sites in Mindanao due to bad weather. It's the same reason why they're saying that there's a drop in Chinese nickel ore imports from the Philippines, about 24% to 779,000 tons only in January. Now, the other thing too is that you think it's because of a slowdown, but actually in China they're saying that they can't seem to get enough nickel ore to really process nickel pig iron as well as to process nickel because they can't seem to get a hold of stocks. In fact, warehouses are reporting that the inventory levels are half what they usually are, meaning that there's a bit of a shortage in China, hence the lack of nickel imports. And it's also being impacted by this the ongoing uncertainty in the mines here, given we are the largest producer of nickel in the world. This is having a carryover effect in China. And looking at the mines so far today, well, they might be on break at the moment, but the mining and oil country down about 0.7%. Only Mark Ventures and Nickel Asia are holding the fort down. But you're seeing a number of other miners, such as Lepanto and Global Ferronickel down. Global Ferronickel, of course, today saying that they are preparing to respond to the show cause order issued to them by the DENR. But that's just the latest in a number of defiant moves or responses to the DENR's audit results and their order for closures and suspensions at the moment. Mines still not a place really to hide, Sean, unfortunately.
All right. Well, since our theme today is kind of like a Groundhog Day kind of theme, the worst hit sector today is actually the financial sector. Jape, I thought they were supposed to be in pole position to benefit from infrastructure financing this year, higher rates from the Fed. What happened today?
Today is, it's a lot of people guess, it could also just be a retreat that's happening at the moment. See-year financials down by about 1.5%, give or take. And you're going to see also that among the movers in the financial sector, only China Bank and Union Bank, two second liners, are actually up. There is one interesting study we read today from Deutsche Bank, just the other day, where Deutsche Bank said that, they are possible. What we're seeing right now is that despite all the upside among banks, there is going to be a lot of competition that's actually going to eat into the return on equity. Now, look, despite even though there is a rosy upside with regards to demand for bank loans, there's going to be a lot of competition between these big banks, and it seems that it's going to be a bloodier fight than we actually thought. Looking at some of these banking stocks, you're going to also notice two of the biggest losers so far today. Metro Bank, which is down despite announcing that their capex has actually increased threefold to 5 billion pesos for 2017, and BDO, which after hitting those all-time highs is up so far, is also retreating quite substantially. Look, the good times can't always last for BDO, and it seems that today is the day that streak for them actually ended. Sean, back up to you.
You're absolutely right, JP. Everybody has a bad day once in a while. All right, another short break. But when we return, the Senate easily clears the Paris Climate Change Act on second reading. And we're speaking with the British Chamber of Commerce about trade opportunities between the EU, or the UK, and the Philippines. The Senate has approved the landmark Paris Climate Change Pact on second reading. Malacanang has already ratified the agreement, and if it passes on its third and final reading next week, that would officially seal the deal. Duterte had criticized the deal in the past because he thinks the commitments would hinder industrial growth. But Chair of the Senate Climate Change Committee, Loren Legarda, says that won't be the case.
It would not be very difficult for the Philippines to meet our targets because we already have the laws to support it. We're not starting from zero. Even before we ratified the agreement, the Philippines was way ahead in terms of policy and legislation. And as I said, the 70% commitment of our nationally determined NDC is premised or pegged or is dependent on the conditions of technical assistance and financial assistance. And we can actually tell developed nations that we need your help to be able to meet the 70% NDC, and that's when technical and financial assistance can come in.
And capital markets are getting ready to support the Paris Treaty. The SEC is currently developing the regulatory and market framework for project bonds and green bonds. The idea is to secure local currency funding through the ASEAN +3 multi-currency bond issuance framework.
And here are some of the latest developments from around the world. Park Geun-hye has been stripped of her power as South Korean president after a court unanimously voted to impeach her. Not only is she required to leave the Blue House residence immediately, she will also lose her presidential immunity over prosecution. The presidential election is expected to be held in 60 days as mandated by Korea's constitution. More states are opposing Trump's revised travel ban. Following Hawaii's legal challenge, the states of Minnesota, Oregon, and New York will be filing lawsuits to block the order. The state of Washington, meanwhile, will move that the court's ruling of the first immigration order should be applied on the revised version. Airbnb has raised an additional $1 billion in funding, putting the company at a value of $31 billion. And according to sources, the room rental service is also considering expansion on the long-term rental business, despite legal issues in some areas. But when asked if going public is in the works for Airbnb, the sources said it's not going to happen anytime soon. And that rounds up our world headlines.
And all roads have been leading southward since President Duterte won. The push to drive investments outside the capital has investors casting their nets further. But where are the pockets of opportunity? Joining us on this Friday, Chris Nelson from the British Chamber of Commerce, or the BritCham. Okay, Chris, we do have some data here from your office. If I could just call up the chart.
Sure.
Yeah, so back in 2015, UK exports to the Philippines grew by 38%, topping the 74.4 billion, it's 74.4 billion US dollars last year. Can you make these figures come alive for us? What did we buy more of from the UK?
Yeah, let me just say clarification. First of all, the total trade to the Philippines is 74 billion, but we grew by 38%. And the reason it grew, actually, the key areas were electrical machinery, pharmaceuticals. We also had some development in food and beverages and cars. So a lot of focus in those areas. But from our side, the British Chamber, actually, a lot of SMEs, and they're looking at ICT. They're looking at beauty care products, they're looking at food and beverage, and they're looking even at environmental to support the economy in terms of waste.
All right, well, let me just refresh your memory. I did go through all your published works from before. And last year, your strategy was to focus on the power sector, most specifically to market Philippines to the British power sector in renewable energy. Tell us how that went last year. Did it come to fruition?
I think it did. I mean, I have to say, obviously, it hasn't come to fruition in the sense of exact business, but I think we've got companies interested, and companies are obviously still interested in the renewable sector. I still think power is an opportunity. It's one of the ones we're going to focus on when we go down to Mindanao.
So it's still continuing, you're extending this 2016 strategy to this year?
I think we are continuing it. Power and infrastructure will always be a focus, and I think it's linking into the Mindanao, where we're going to be going, obviously, at the end of the month. So that's there. We're also broadening out to other segments.
Okay, so you're going down to Mindanao. At the moment, before this trade mission next week or next week, where do your investments or investments from the UK to Mindanao stand? Is it very little, not a lot?
I think, obviously, in terms of it compared to the Philippines as a whole, it's obviously less, but there are British companies that have operated there. Obviously, if you look also, we do business and trade. I mean, obviously, everyone knows that Mindanao is very strong in agribusiness, bananas, is actually developed. In fact, our ambassador said it was actually started out in terms of the seedling from Kew Gardens in London. So there is a link there historically.
Nice.
We're going to go there, though, to look at other opportunities.
Such as?
Well, we're looking at things, for example, we're going to do agribusiness, infrastructure, ICT. We've got major companies. One of our key sponsors is also professional services. We're Pru Life. We're going to have GSK with us. We're going to have KPMG. And we leave also Standard Bank. So there's a lot of opportunity of big companies, also small to medium-sized enterprises.
Okay, so there is definitely that focus also on MSMEs.
Yes.
Investing here in the Philippines. Earlier, right before we started the show, I asked you a question, and you actually clarified to me that this trade mission that you're bringing, a delegation of some 20 plus, well, delegates for that matter, and you're saying that they're not all British.
No. So if you look at the British Chamber, we're about 280 companies, but it's actually a mixture of British and local companies, and really we act as like a networking. And therefore we're going to be bringing from here delegates to Mindanao. It's in line, of course, with the plan to develop growth outside of Metro Manila. So we anticipate, of course, you'll have British companies like I've named, Pru Life, GSK. You'll also have some local companies as well, and we're going to try and do matchmaking when we're in Davao.
Can you share with me which local companies these are?
Not at the moment, but we intend to send out a list very shortly. But we're going to be also meeting very local companies in Davao. I went for a pre-trip just recently, and I met Amflo, which actually does the container port, one of the container ports. It's obviously very strong in bananas, and it's also strong in industrial parks and commercial. So we're going to be seeing their facilities, because obviously there's an opportunity for companies to base themselves in Davao.
Yeah, we've just had Anflo over here also about 6 weeks ago. Anyone else apart from Anflo, the local bread company from Mindanao?
So we're going to look also at some of the local entities, like we have a local company there called Sancris, who are also one of the suppliers of ICT. We're looking to obviously work closely with the local administration. By the way, one of our partners there is the Davao Chambers of Commerce. So they're going to be speaking at the event. We also have Mindanao Development Council. We have Mindanao Business Council. We're getting a lot of strong support, and we anticipate a very good forum, which will be on the 31st of March.
All right, take a look at this. I know it says EU at the top with 27%, but at the moment, you're still lumped in there with them, right? So let's break this down. It is a top source of FDI, at least in the first half of 2016. As we know, FDI kind of slowed down in the third quarter. We expect to pick up. So a lot of this is, well, you know, people have been weighing in, and they're saying people are on a wait-and-see kind of mode, trying to assess a political risk coming out of the administration. Where do you stand on that? We've spoken to Gunter Taus, we've spoken to a bunch of other chambers, and they're saying, like, okay, the representative here, meaning your peer, would be, since you live here, you're kind of more, have a factual opinion of things. Are British investors scared or worry of setting foot in the Philippines?
Let me be very clear. From the chamber side, we tend to deal with small to medium-sized enterprises. Although actually one of the big investors that's come in recently would be Dyson's. Dyson's has set up a plant. But I think in terms of small to medium-sized enterprises, actually it's growing in interest. We've had over 1,000 companies in 3 years. We've just had companies set up business recently. We just had the Great British Festival, 500,000 visitors. And we've just had a company starting doing business in terms of whiskey imports.
Ooh.
So I still think from SME size, from the British companies, the Philippines is still a good, attractive story for growth. And of course, Mindanao fits into that because we're looking for growth outside the main urban area of Metro Manila. What
about a really quick, before I let you go, a quick wish list? I mean, you've been here in the Philippines for a while. What has changed, what has not in terms of barriers to entry for foreign ownership issues and all of that, red tape?
Okay, very quickly, I think we're very supportive in the 10-point plan of opening up the Constitution. Obviously, in terms of foreign ownership, we think that will boost FDI if that occurs. I think there has been obviously developments in terms of where I've been here 14 years. I've seen tremendous growth. But I think we'd also like to see ease of doing business improve, which I think is part of the focus by the Department of Trade and Industry, who are supporting us, Mon Lopez. And I think the repeal, which is making things more competitive, because that's actually the big cry when companies come, ease of doing business, which I think is a focus here. That's my quick take.
That is absolutely true, and that is something you have in common with other chambers. Thank you very much for your insights,
for your time.
Chris Nelson, and good luck in Mindanao on the 31st. Right, still to come, all lies. That is what the groups campaigning against Secretary Gina Lopez have to say about her answers at the last hearing.
back in the loop, and let's take a quick check now of some national headlines. Taguig City claims it is now the rightful owner of Bonifacio Global City after the Court of Appeals dismissed Makati's claim over part of Fort Bonifacio. The court junked Makati's bid for forum shopping or pursuing simultaneous similar cases at different courts. Makati City denies that this means Taguig is the owner of BGC, and Makati will exhaust all legal options to protect its territory. President Duterte says he's willing to set aside Mighty Corporation's alleged tax evasion case if they can shell out 3 billion pesos. He publicly rejected Mighty Corp President Alexander Wong Choo King's 1.5 billion peso offer to settle on Thursday, and even raised the requirement to 5 billion pesos later that day. The president says Wong Choo King must give the money to the health department and repair hospitals in Basilan, Jolo, and Tondo, or else face time behind bars. And those opposing DNR Secretary Gina Lopez's confirmation held a press conference today and called the responses at Thursday's hearing all lies. Representatives from the Chamber of Mines, indigenous groups, and the academe again raised concerns over Lopez's incompetence and called on the Commission on Appointments to fact-check all her claims. Critics are also urging the CA to fast-track their decision on Lopez's appointment instead of waiting until next Tuesday. And that's the latest from around the nation.
And you might want to cut down on your electricity use this month. I mean, who doesn't? Power rates will go up by 66 centavos per kilowatt hour, mainly because of the Malampaya maintenance shutdown earlier this year. Mitch Rosa gives us the details.
Meralco customers will be paying more for electricity this month, with households needing to shell out up to 330 pesos extra depending on their consumption. The 66 centavo per kilowatt hour increase is largely due to a 58 centavo adjustment in the generation charge, inclusive of a just approved 22 centavo rate hike this month to cover higher fuel costs due to a 20-day Malampaya shutdown in January. That 22 centavo increase will be repeated in April and May. Meralco says supply was also slightly hampered by forced outages of several power plants in the Luzon grid.
Another part of the adjustment was due to the lower dispatch of some of the power plants that went into maintenance. So kasama na kunyari yung Quezon Power, yung Calaca, at yung isang block ng Ilihan, they all underwent scheduled maintenance in the supply month of February. Tapos dahil din may reduced supply because of the maintenance of the plants, umakyat din ng konti yung spot market prices.
The Energy Department says this may be the last time that consumers will have to bear the cost of power plants shifting to more expensive fuel whenever the Malampaya natural gas facility undergoes maintenance. It says contracts will be reviewed to see if costs can be absorbed, an initiative supported by the Malampaya operator Shell Philippines Exploration.
We will look into these contracts and we will coordinate and we will ask their inputs on how to address the policy of Secretary Kusing. Because scheduled maintenance is scheduled, ibig sabihin foreseeable. Kung na-foresee yan, dapat walang shock.
We're willing to explore opportunities. We're willing to work with the DOE and with the power users in the end. Kasi sabi ko nga, interest is about paano namin deliver yung gas safely, reliably, and efficiently.
With the summer season fast approaching, both the DOE and Meralco asked consumers to manage their consumption. According to the government's outlook, power reserves in the Luzon grid are expected to get tighter towards the end of April until June. Michelle Orosa, Ople, Bloomberg TV, Philippines.
Just about an hour to go before trading wraps up for the week, actually. Let's see how local stocks are faring with JP still in the red.
Well, so much for that, for a potential bump from those good trade figures with exports beating estimates at 22.5%. We'll just let the board itself tell the story. Red with only properties escaping the clutches of losses. But again, we've got an hour and the losses could actually catch up with the real estate developers today. But so far, the PSE composite, the main index, firmly below 7,250 so far. And it's looking like it's just following this this retreat that we're seeing in ASEAN markets. A lot of these emerging markets, of course, on retreat. And some people are likening it to, are probably attributing it to the Fed's meeting coming up on next week, Wednesday. And also the fact that the U.S. jobs data is are supposed to be reported later on tonight. And this could be the final nail in the coffin, pardon my use of a morose metaphor there. Just before the Fed decide, just to cement the Fed's conviction that they are going to raise rates. Remember, the odds now for a March rate increase are at 100%. It is throwing a lot of these markets in a tailspin. Take a look at the PSE. Then, the downward trend is pretty much just, the line just tells the whole story. 725 35.1 so far. It's just fighting to stay above that, but it looks like probably not going to have a strong. Probably not going to have a strong end by today. And finally, the peso again, another one of those things to watch. You can see that strength from positive trade data starting to give way already and starting to wane also, with the peso at 50.35. It's a bit of a mixed day, despite the fact that we are seeing a recovery in our trade data for January. Seems the markets are in for a pretty heavy end to the week, Sean.
Right, thank you very much for that update, Jay. Looks like we go into the weekend on a kind of a sputtery note. Meanwhile, the country's outsourcing industry is also concerned that Trump's protectionist policy may soon affect the sector. However, the industry is not taking the threats of American protectionism sitting down. The IT Business Processing Association of the Philippines is considering hiring the service of a U.S.-based consultant as early as this month. The consultant, which may be a lobbyist or a research group, will be tasked to keep an eye on Trump's government. Right, well, Jake, one kind of a slight upside that we've been seeing are exports renaissance, right? We gotta get the mood up just before the weekend. I mean, more than double of the forecast. Well, now, Jake, the peso, of course, has sort of lost value against the dollar late last year. You think this had something to do with it? And, of course, our service exports are all call centers, right? Mostly. So I guess we're not in trouble just yet.
In some sense, it sort of supports this confidence that some other BSP officials have and economic planning officials have, who say that we could probably rest easy even if it hits 52. Let's hope it doesn't get there too fast. But this January data, although it's only a month, is supporting this particular outlook. What I am also very interested in is the fact that we're seeing a lot of pickup in forestry products, especially coconut oil exports. Now, it's still not a big component of our exports, but that is it's a sign that perhaps we're starting to diversify our exports. That said, the bread and butter is still electronic goods and electronic products for the Philippines, and there has to be a lot of focus to sort of maintain that share at least and the momentum and growth there. But so far, the fact that it's coming back also is a good sign for exports overall.
Well, what's exciting me actually is that top line figure that you showed in your pie chart, almost 31%, going to capital goods formation. Now, I just want to honor Quintin, who's still in Bhutan, but this is his favorite. This is our favorite topic all the time. When we see capital goods formation going up or taking a big chunk of the pie, we get really, really excited. It means or it goes to show or might signify that we're actually exporting higher value finished products as opposed to raw materials. Well, or at least it's balancing.
Well, in the
right?
words of Mr. Pastrana, it seems that the rubber for exports is hitting the road there, Sean, and hopefully it continues, right?
You know what? You did sound like Kitin. Just
if you close your eyes just a little bit, right?
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. Okay, we have our that's it for us today, Friday, the 10th of March, 2017. I'm Shania.
I'll follow our Twitter and Facebook on Bloomberg TV Philippines. I'm JP Ong. Have a great weekend, guys, and thanks for watching.